and the meditations of my heart be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, my rock and my redeemer. Please be seated. The story that we heard of the Passover and the 10th plague is the story of the turning point in the children of Israel's journey out of slavery. At the beginning of this story, they're in bondage in Egypt, but at the end they have been sent out of slavery to go to the Promised Land. So this is a story of liberation, of redemption. But it might not seem to be about these things. It might not seem to be a very uplifting story at all, because perhaps the most memorable image from this story is of the children of Israel taking shelter in the tiny spheres of their homes, while all around them, in the darkest hour of the night, there's this thing called the destroyer, killing the firstborn of the Egyptians. How does that inspire us to lead better lives? In the deeper sense, this story is about our deliverance from evil. It shows us how even if we're in darkness in a land that's populated by our enemies, we can still get out and start to take steps towards real spiritual freedom. And it's a powerful story. Powerful partly because it gives us a taste of how frightening evil can be. It's powerful because maybe we recognize that destroyer and some of the forces that are actually present in our lives. And it's a powerful story because it shows us that we can still escape these things. We can escape even the ugliest and most awful forces in our lives. But before we can really see this as a story of deliverance, there's a stumbling block that we need to get over. That stumbling block is the idea that it's the Lord who sends the destroyer. It's the Lord who strikes the firstborn of the Egyptians. And it came to pass at midnight that the Lord struck all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh who sat on his throne to the firstborn of the captive who was in the dungeon. If the Lord does things like this, then who do we go to for safety? The stumbling block isn't unique to this story either. Over and over in the Old Testament, the Lord is attributed responsibility for things that we would call evil. We know that if He's really God, He can't be responsible for these things. But then why are the stories written this way? Strangely enough, we're told in the writings of the New Church that the Lord's anger in stories like this means mercy. The Lord looks on all of us with mercy, no matter how evil we are. But sometimes when He regards us with compassion, what we experience is anger. Listen to this passage from Arcana Celestia. The reason why the Lord's anger is used to mean leniency and mercy is that all forms of punishment that the evil suffer arise because of the Lord's mercy shown toward the good, to protect them from harm done by the evil. Yet the Lord does not inflict punishments on the evil. Rather, it's they who inflict them on themselves, since evil and forms of punishment in the next life are bound up with one another. The evil especially inflict punishments on themselves when the Lord acts mercifully toward the good, for at such times evils and the resulting punishments are on the increase in the evil. So the Lord is shielding all of us with His mercy. And sometimes the very fact that He's doing that means that He's thwarting us. Because if we really want to hurt somebody else, then we're pitting ourselves against the Lord's mercy. And that mercy is unshakable. We only really hurt ourselves when we throw ourselves against it. And that way evil brings pain on itself. But when we're caught up in the false thinking that goes along with evil, it's easy to put the blame for that pain on the Lord's doorstep. So in this story, the Lord gets credited with being the one who strikes the Egyptians. But in the deeper sense of the story, the Egyptians represent spirits from hell, and the destroyer also represents hell. It's hell's own evil testifying against it and condemning it. The children of Israel, in the midst of all that, represent people who have been touched by evil, people who have been slaves to evil even, but who are not condemned. They take shelter in their homes, and the destroyer passes over them, and they're safe. And the thing that keeps them safe is the Passover celebration that they've observed, and those markings made with the blood of the Lamb on their doorposts. That Passover meal of unleavened bread and lamb and the markings on the doorposts all represent things having to do with innocence. But before we dig into this any further, let's consider how we usually look at our struggle with evil. What's the word for what we're supposed to do with evil? Resist it? Fight it? Conquer it? Shun it? Run from it? Maybe the right answer is all of the above. But we certainly get the message in a lot of places that we're to fight evil. There's all kinds of movies and stories out there about the battle between good and evil. And the Word is also full of stories like that. But what does it mean to go into battle against evil? Or to come at the question from another angle, when we're struggling to get hell out of our lives, how often do we find ourselves facing an enemy that we can see in broad daylight? An enemy who will wait for us while we get on our armor and assemble ourselves and attack. When we realize that there's something in our minds or in our hearts that we wish weren't there, it's almost always as the result of an ambush. We're dealing with something that snuck up on us in the dark. We can recognize that we want to get rid of this enemy, but how? It's not a fair fight. The enemy does not want to be seen. And that's why we so often find ourselves wondering, what do I do to stop feeling this way? How do I change the way I am? How do I stop wanting this when this is the only thing that feels good? It would be nice if we could fight hell on our own terms. We could know the solution, the objective. We could meet our enemies in a predetermined place and lead a charge against everything that we wanted to get rid of. But hell's strategy is subterfuge. They trick us. They lie to us. They make us comfortable and then enslave us. They systematically pollute every truth that we could use to get ourselves to get up out of that bondage. So what do we do then? How do we fight back? Think of how small the children of Israel would have felt that night of the Passover. They were already slaves, were powerless against the Egyptians. Now there's this even worse terror all around them. They can't even go out of their homes because the destroyer's out there. It's like the night itself is out to get them. All they could do is seek shelter. Most of the time, the evil that we face isn't that big and terrible seeming, and that's a sign that the Lord is protecting us. But sometimes we also feel overwhelmed and very, very small, surrounded by evil that's overwhelming. How do we defeat hell then? What protects us then? The blood on the children of Israel's doorposts that kept the destroyer away is said to represent holy truth belonging to the good of innocence. Symbolically, painting that blood on the doorposts means taking refuge in innocence and letting that innocence be marked on the gateway to our minds. First of all, why innocence? What does innocence protect? Isn't that word synonymous with naivety? Think of the innocence of our children. Isn't that something that we work so hard to protect? Because it seems like there's so much out there that would just snatch it away. Secondly, what if we're not innocent? Maybe it's all well and good to say that innocence can keep us safe, but if we've already sinned and let hell in the front door, it's too late to be innocent, isn't it? The innocence that the Word talks about isn't these things. It isn't the naivety of childhood, and it isn't the perfect spotlessness of some imaginary person who's never done evil. Innocence, as we read in the lesson from Arcana Celestia, we're purified from evil and falsity not when we erase every bad thing that we've ever thought and every false thing that's ever been in our heads. We're purified when we're able to be held in innocence. And that innocence involves our understanding that we can't just wash away all of our evil. We can't forget every bad thing we've ever thought. We can't just throw the destroyer into hell. Innocence, we read, consists in acknowledging that nothing but evil resides with us, and anything good comes in from the Lord. And also in believing that one neither knows nor perceives anything, including the truth of faith, if left to oneself, but only with the Lord's help. This attitude could strike us as being no help at all, as though it amounts to saying, I'm evil already, so come right in. Walk all over me, destroyer. But the truth is the other way around. Innocence is about seeing evil in us, seeing our powerlessness, and then saying to the Lord, fill this space in my heart because I can't do it by myself. And because innocence drops its defenses and turns to the Lord, evil can't touch it. The destroyer could not come into a house that had been marked with that sign of innocence. So in a way, our power against evil lies in powerlessness. Our ability to overcome the worst evil rests in the simplest willingness to say that we need the Lord. Listen to this passage. Charity, devoid of innocence, is not charity, and still less can love to the Lord exist without innocence. Innocence is therefore an absolutely essential element of love and charity, and consequently of good. Opprobrium of innocence, that is, innocence that can really be said to belong to us, consists in knowing, acknowledging, and believing, not with the lips but with the heart, that nothing but evil originates in oneself, and everything good in the Lord. And therefore that such opprobrium is altogether black. When a person confesses this and believes this in his heart, the Lord flows in with good and truth, and instills a heavenly opprobrium into him, which is bright and shining. Nobody can possibly be truly humble unless that acknowledgement and belief are present in his heart. This teaching touches on a tension that's at the core of the teachings of the new church. Innocence is about recognizing that there is blackness inside of us and we need the Lord. And then when we're humble enough to say that, the Lord makes us bright, shining. In the basic statement of the faith of the new church, we read that we must do good and shun evil as though by ourselves, but we must believe that these things are done by the Lord in us and through us. When we give everything good to the Lord, then we're able to do good seemingly on our own. When we take shelter in the simple truth that we need the Lord's help, then we receive the ability to get up as though by our own power and go out of slavery to the promised land. So when we feel trapped in patterns of evil that we can't break, or when we feel that destroyer prowling, we can go inward to a part of ourselves where it's just us and the Lord, and say in our hearts and with our prayers and with our actions that we want to be servants of the Lord, because He can keep us safe, and He is the only thing that can. Innocence isn't about just saying that. The blood that was marked on the doorposts represents the truth of innocence. But that truth isn't just words. The truth of innocence is whatever bears witness to a heart that is willing to follow the Lord. And if we say we're willing to follow Him and then don't get up and follow Him, that action testifies much more loudly than the words. But if we are willing, if we do truly want to take shelter in the Lord's strength, He knows that. And then hell can't touch us. The destroyer is all around us, and it passes over us, and then all the evil around us collapses under its own weight, and then we can set out on that journey towards freedom. And that is how we gain victory over hell. Not by our own strength, but because we become humble enough to take refuge in the strength of God. And the more we're willing to live in that space of innocence, the more safe and full and free our lives are able to become. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Amen. Please rise.